Hey! But in all seriousness though, hey guys, so a while back, I think like going like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was thinking about whether or not I should record a video just for the sake of recording a video, because it's definitely one of those things where I begin to like question whether or not I'm even like doing something right. And it's like, problem is this, if I wanted to make a new video, it would have to be something interesting, right? Because it can't just be anything boring, because if it is something boring, you're not gonna like it. So I decided, why not do a video of something that's pretty interesting. So I thought, why not something that I'm interested in, but also something that, you know, maybe you guys can have fun in, you know? So we decided to do the concept of Genshin theories. So I have some theories, and again, this is all theories, all speculation, all conjecture. I'm dyslexic. And yeah, that's how we do it. So again, a lot of these theories are going to be interesting. A lot of these theories are very much based on my own personal opinion, based on what I know from Genshin, and based on what I know from other content creators, but also, interestingly enough, based on what other games have, other Hoyo games have. It's not all completely connected, but there are some loose threads that we can definitely, you know, tie up here and there. With that said, let's begin. For the first theory that I have is of this: the theory of abyss and reason. So to give an understanding as to what the abyss and what reason is, we first need to understand at least a quick review of the fundamentals of Teyvat. Again, I won't go through all of the history of Teyvat. There are plenty of videos out there that basically detail what's going on, that detail what happened in the past and what's happening in the present, and what could possibly happen in the future. You know, so if you want any of those kinds of more detailed videos, I'll put that in the link in the description below. So, the point being is that I'm trying to show you, or at least do a quick review or reminder of what these are. So let's first start with reason. What we know of reason is this. One, they start with the heavenly principles and with the traveler. Now, why do I say only these two? And not, you know, for example, oh, maybe the second descender or the third descender, you know? How come the first and fourth descender are the only ones that I speak of that wield reason? Well, you gotta understand that reason is just simply the power to make things a reality. The power to make things that are reality come true. You know? Make a possibility true. Make it a reality. That's what reason is. It's the thing that makes objects and realities and concepts make sense. More on that later. Put a note on that, because that is actually really important to put on, you know, perspective of that kind of thing. Now, next up, what is the abyss? From what the game has shown us, the abyss is seen as something that's like very, you know, very malevolent, this evil, dark power that, you know, has no purpose at all, and it just wants to destroy. And to that much we know is true. There are evidence, and there is evidence within the games of its destructive and very malicious intent and nature. But however, I've come to realize that there is more to it than just that. We'll get to that in a bit. So, the first things that we need to understand is at least show you what I'm trying to say. So, this is my theory of the abyss and reason. My theory is this. My theory is that reason and the abyss are not forces of good and evil, but rather two complementary states of power and reality. The cosmic equivalence, or you could say the Hoyoverse equivalence of matter and antimatter. They define and balance all existence within. Again, we'll get into that later. We'll deep dive into everything later, so I'll explain the theory first. The nature of the abyss is not inherently malevolent. It is a reactive, wish-binding force that responds to desires of those who wield it. It can grant wishes and reshape reality on the wielder's intent. However, when multiple individuals use the abyss at once, their conflicting desires collide, creating contradictions that cause destruction. The abyss mirrors human desire. It is dangerous not because of what it really is, but because of what people want to do, because of what differences there are between each person. Each desire is unique to its own wielder, to its own user of the abyss. It's because of what people want from it that is so dangerous. Those who wield it without restraint are consumed by their own wishes. Yet, figures like, for example, Skirk or the Abyss sibling show that you can wield the Abyss without falling to chaos or without falling to madness by harboring no selfish wish. So that's the nature of the Abyss. That's the theory of the Abyss. That's just half of it. Right now I'm reading it through a doc that I have on my phone, basically detailing of what I said. So what do I mean by this? What I mean by this is a wish binding power. Think of it like this. In the recent event that we had with Nicole and Alice in the memory bubble, Alice mentioned something interesting about saying how that the Abyss is basically the manifestation of non-chosen paths, of non-chosen fates. It is the hatred of not being chosen. Now, these fates that aren't chosen end up having hatred because what happens? That wish wasn't a reality. The rejected wish ends up becoming part of it. Now, interestingly enough, there are some comparisons that I can give to, and I can give some references to that it reminds me of. One example is in Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works. Why Fate Stay Night specifically? Why not Fate Zero or all the others? Because, you know, they're very similar. Because Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works kind of touches into this topic of wish granting. Reason creates wishes in reality. The Abyss is the amalgamation of wishes that are rejected, becoming a physical manifestation, but a manifestation that should never belong in this world. That much we know. In Fate Stay Night, when the Holy Grail was finally given a host, for example, in this case we knew it was Shinji Mato, Gilgamesh said something interesting. He said that if there is no person who gives the Holy Grail a wish, what happens? It begins to take everyone's wishes. All of humanity's wishes, which in this case all of the people of Fuyuki's wishes, begin to converge and begin to amalgamate. But there's danger to that, because one wish can be the complete opposite of another wish. So what happens? There's contradictions. It doesn't make sense. So how can a wish granter grant two completely opposite wishes? It can't. So what happens? It begins to create destruction. That destruction is the result of the Abyss. That is what the Abyss is. The Abyss is like the Holy Grail, but without anyone to give it a wish. You know? For example, the 5 sinners of Conria gained this power, but didn't fall to complete madness, albeit with some exceptions, because of a strong wish and a strong desire that they had, but also because of a hatred that they had of this desire. You know? For example, Rerir succumbed to the power of the Abyss out of love because the Abyss basically rejected him the possibility of being able to be with Thelindis, his lover. That's a rejected path, that's a rejected fate. So what happens? That rejected fate now becomes part of the Abyss. And because that wish is so entangled with him, he basically becomes consumed by it. He becomes consumed by that selfish wish. Or by that, wish that has, no control over it to a degree. Now, interestingly enough, there is another interesting aspect of it. When you have characters like Skirk or the Abyss sibling wield the Abyss but not fall into madness, it makes you wonder, how come they haven't fallen into madness? How come they have not lost their minds? How come they're not, psychotic or everything like that? And to that, there's an interesting thing. The reason why I say that is because we're now going to head to the second part of the theory. And that is the nature of reason. Reason is the light that defines orders and gives form, the power of choice and definition. It is the creative force that turns potential into reality. The heavenly principles in Celestia, or they may be both, depending on, what theory you feel or you think or believe in, wield reason to shape and regulate existence. However, wielding reason does not guarantee kindness. It can build as early as it destroys. For example, when the heavenly principles descended upon ancient Tevat, they terraformed the world, killing the dragons that once ruled and established humanity as the dominant race. This act was not evil in intent, but lacked empathy, a rigid imposition of reason's order over what already exists. Now, we'll stop here for now. There's still a bit more to speak on about, but what this means is this. Reason is not an amalgamation of good desires or good wishes, you know? Sometimes there are wishes that are so strong that the abyss can't handle it, but the only reason why they're not the abyss is because they become reality. When it's something that it can become a reality, reason takes over. For example, someone with a resolute will to want to do something and will do it no matter what the cost, no matter what the sacrifice, reason comes in, basically almost takes over. For example, when you have the Traveler, for example, in that one scene where he's fighting the Shoki no, is it Shogi no Kami? I think that's how you say it. In that cutscene, you saw when he jumped up high in the air and he did that stabbing attack, you saw that golden light. That was reason. Now, the reason why it was interesting, he had no, kind intent, because he had to hurt Scaramouche. He had to hurt the Wanderer. And at the time, he was the Balladeer at the time. Now, that doesn't mean that he couldn't wield reason. No, the reason why he was able to wield reason is because his will was absolute. The Traveler was like, I'm going to stop him no matter what. And I will make it happen because it will happen. That kind of mentality or that kind of concept is what can create or I guess to a degree, complete the conditions for reason to be wielded. It's kind of why you see a lot of moments of reason being used by the Traveler, usually being moments that are resolute or absolute. Never moments of hesitation. It's always in moments of resolution or of decision. Interestingly. So, the same thing can apply to the heavenly principles. When the heavenly principles came, or when Thanes came, their will was resolute, and they wanted to terraform the world, as we know by the new Traveler skin. They came here to terraform the world because they wanted it to be fit for humanity. And the AI, or the heavenly principles, let's say, for example, decided or had made that resolute decision that Teyvat will be fit for humans and it will always be fit for humans because I will make it so. So because of that, that immense power of reason became something that, the heavenly principles used. Now, that doesn't mean that, being able to use reason makes you a descender. There are some other caveats there, as we know. So, let's continue. So that's just, the part that we're going to talk up into right now. When Dragon King Nibelung, desiring to protect his kin and the world they cherished, turned to the abyss to fight back against the heavenly principles and their reason-born might. His wish was pure, to defend and preserve. But when reason and abyss clash, an annihilation reaction occurred. Why is this important? The reason why I say that this is important is because, again, antimatter and matter. When the two collide, it creates what we call an annihilation sequence or an annihilation reaction. It disperses an insane amount of energy. And the same thing could be said with reason and the abyss. When two opposing natures clash, it disperses an insane amount of energy. Why do you think that in the Byakuya collection, in the book of Before Sun and Moon, it says that the War of Vengeance, or the War of Funerary Flame, was a war that was so powerful, that was so devastating, that it said that the world was rent asunder. A Pep even said that the world was on the verge of collapse, because those constant annihilation reactions became something that was common, because of the two opposing natures. Now, how does this relate to things like, the abyss and reason being important? Why they're so important to not just, the Traveler or to the, to the heavenly principles, but also to the concept of descenders. Why is it important to later on story, or the more, I guess you could say, endgame of the story of Teyvat? I'll continue reading on the doc that I have here. This cataclysmic event nearly destroyed the world, and its echoes live on in Teyvat's present form. Thus, the downfall of ancient civilizations and the scars of Conria may not have been divine punishment, but the natural reaction between those two opposing forces. So that we know much is true. When Conria was destroyed, it was destroyed because the abyss, those abyssal creatures, happened to be there. So think about it. A being of reason going to purify the abyss, what happens, that annihilation reaction happens, and because of that insane disperse of amount of energy, what happens? It's complete destruction. So it makes, to a degree, some sense that Conria was destroyed at that moment. It was completely destroyed. Because of the amount of conflict and, I guess you could say, clashes of those two natures, that destruction was kind of inevitable. It was something very powerful. It was something that, basically rent the whole world almost to its end, but to a degree, it didn't. Now, let's head now to the next part. The Traveler and the Sibling. The Traveler wields reason, symbolized by that golden light, as I mentioned before. They are a descender, a being who moves between defined worlds. Unlike the heavenly principles, the Traveler embodies compassion, reason guided by kindness. However, the Abyss Sibling wields the Abyss, not as corruption, but as acceptance, embracing all possible paths and outcomes. They are not a descender because they belong to all potential worlds at once. Again, potential. These potential fates that weren't chosen, that weren't made reality with reason, became the Abyss. That's what she began to accept. One way to see how it makes sense, think of it like this. When the Abyss Order was in Natlan, and you saw that they were doing all of the meditation, trying to regain their memories, it wasn't, it had to be one person's memories. No, it had to be an amalgamation of everyone's memories. Keep in mind, the reason why the Abyss Sibling is not a descender is not because, of their power. It's not really much of their power. It's because their will doesn't rival the world, because their own will, not the Abyss's will, but Lumine's will, in this case, let's put Aether as the canonical main character. Lumine as the Abyss Sibling. Lumine's will, her own personal will, her persona, her own will, does not rival a world. That world rivaling power, that world shattering power, belongs to the Abyss. So she's basically being swept away by this collective will. Like I said, that Holy Grail. If that Holy Grail can't grant one wish, if it can't grant a single wish, it'll try to grant every single wish that exists. Every single possibility of fate that is rejected, it will try to grant into reality. That's what it's trying to do. That hatred of not being chosen and the desire to become a reality. Now, here. Together, they represent two sides of the same truth, like two sides of the same coin, if you were to put that analogy. Reason asks, what is right? While the Abyss asks, what could have been? Now, what are some meanings? What could this mean, in the future on? This means that the Abyss is desire without restraint, possibility, and reason is desire defined through will, through own sheer personal will, reality. Now, this relates to visions, because they are the mortal reflection of reason. They are like a type of mirror of reason. Wish is shaped within Celestia's bounds, within, the heavenly principles, limits that they put. That's what visions are. The Abyss is the reflection of unbounded wishes. It's an infinite amount of wishes, amount of fates that weren't chosen. That's why it's so almost limitless, it looks like. It feels limitless. But that's only because the amount of desires or the amount of fates that weren't chosen is nearly infinite. It feels limitless. Not because it is, but because, simply put, it just has no constraints. The one who wields it has no constraints to themselves. Now, another thing is that, because it is a power without divine approval or limitation. But both stem from the same source, human will. Now, I know I said Dragon King Nibelung, the Heavenly Principles, the Traveler, and the Abyss Sibling. But what does that have to do with Skirk? The reason why I say Skirk, this is actually pretty important. So, the reason why I say Skirk is because her desire is to grow stronger, to protect her friends, and to one day defeat her master, which is Sertologi, one of the 5 sinners of Conria. Now, why does that matter? It is because that she is willing the Abyss, sure, but because it's her own personal will, it's her own wish, it's her own desire, not a desire given by someone else, that means that the Abyss is completely under her control. Why do you think, Skirk hasn't been corrupted? Granted, we know that she is of a race that is compatible with the Abyss, But you gotta understand, even beings that are compatible with the Abyss have to have a certain amount of control and finesse to it to be able to wield it for long periods of time. Now, the reason why I say that this is important, why, Skir could be a possible descender, but is not because, oh, she has a will that rivals the world. No, it's just that one of the requirements is that she has her own persona, her own will is enough to become a descender. The only thing is just that that will is not strong enough to go against the world. No, because her desire is to protect her friends and to defeat her master. And so because of that, the Abyss is like, okay, I will grant you a wish. I wouldn't say it's docile, but it is compromising. It compromises with you by granting your wish and giving you power because you yourself gave it that wish. If you give the Abyss a wish to grant, it won't try to corrupt you. Instead, it will try to help you and get that wish. Now, the reason why Lumine isn't one is because her will is an accumulation of Conry's will. You can't have a collective will become a descendant. That doesn't work. It wouldn't really make too much sense. Really, that would be a bit too dangerous. So even if they tried to do that, I'm sure that Heavenly Principles would have done something about it, maybe the shades of life, time, space, and death, like, they would have done something about it, But who knows? We don't know, because that is an unknown possibility. Now, in conclusion, should I say in conclusion? I'm not so sure. I mean, these kinds of things are very important because it is very important to the end game of the story, to the later on of the story, because as we go on, more later into the story, as we meet, we're getting closer to meet the Tsaritsa, the Cryo Archon, we're going to begin to understand more of what was her perspective as to why she decided to rebel against the Heavenly Principles. Why, to gather the remains of the third Descender, a being who could be either of Abyss or of Reason, whatever it may be, why gain that will to rival the Heavenly Principles? Why not use another will that is already a Descender that's already existent, like the Traveler, for example? Why not use that? That's why these things are so important, because we don't know what's going to happen. You can data mine and find leaks and all that other stuff, sure. You can come up with conjectures and speculations, sure. But we'll never know in the end, So that is something that we should think about. Now, in conclusion, the Abyss and Reason are the twin foundations of existence. So one reference, if I were to put it to another game, is Honkai Star Rail, just the Honkai Impact universe. You have the Tree of Life and the Quantum Seed. Both try to devour each other to a degree, but because of that, it's a constant stalemate. So it's a perfect type of balance. It's a destructive balance, but it's a balance nonetheless. It is the mirror and the mold, if you were to say it like that. When the two coexist in balance, creation thrives. You need the light for the shadow. When they collide, however, annihilation follows. And in the Traveler and their sibling lies a chance for reconciliation. Because what we're seeing right now between the Traveler and the sibling is clashing. We're not seeing coexistence. So because of that, destruction is bound to happen. But with reconciliation, there is a possibility that things could take a turn for the better. But we don't know. We don't know how MiHoYo is going to take... sorry, not MiHoYo. Hoyoverse. We don't know how Hoyoverse is going to take that story in the future. If they'll take it to that path or they'll take it to another path. We don't know. But one thing I can say for sure is that a union of light and shadow, of what is and what could be, is something that can change the aspect or the outcome of the story completely. Again, all of this is conjecture, all of this is, speculation, all of these are theories. Don't take anything I say too seriously. But if I were to leave you off with something, it would be something a little bit on the simple side. I would say this. If a will is determined by what you desire, then could it be that the Traveler and the Abyss sibling are what we call the independent one? Or are they the dependent one? Because there's two differences. Independent means that they're able to go on their own. Dependent means that they have to depend on something else. The Traveler are independent because they rely only on their own will, on their own will of reason. But the Abyss sibling depends on the will of the Abyss in order to get these goals, in order to do these things that they're doing. They require the will of the Abyss, not their own will. That is something to think about. Again, it's been a while since I recorded a video like this. I've only recorded videos for things like school assignments and stuff like that, but I've never recorded a YouTube video like this in a long time. This is actually my first ever like face-to-face camera video. My first video that I ever did on the channel that I'm about to post was a messed up or cringy attempt of a voice acting like skit. Why? I don't know. But I mean, hey, it happens. So anyways, leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and any videos and any links to any information that I can come up with, I'll definitely put them in the video description below. Also, there are some content creators that I know of, and I highly recommend you guys watching to give you guys an even more detailed overview and explanation of what I'm trying to say. Granted, some things might be against what they say or might be completely different or opposite of what I'm saying, you know, their opinions, you know, but they could help you get a good reference point. So once that happens, you'll come to learn. So keep learning and hope to see you guys again soon.